So the Olympics took place in a place called Olympia in ancient Greece. And Olympia was a sanctuary to Zeus, god Zeus, starting around 1000 BCE. And it was a religious festival. People went out there, sacrificed animals, and worshiped Zeus. At some point, probably around 700 BCE, they started holding athletic contests at the same time they were doing the religious festival. The Greeks later decided that the first Olympics were held in 776 BCE. At least some of them thought that. Some of them thought the first ones were held in 884 BCE. There was a lot of confusion about when they started, but somewhere in there, after the festival had been in place for a while, they started holding athletic contests as well. It's difficult to overestimate how important the Olympics were to the Greeks. The Olympics were, in many ways, the single most important cultural event in the Greek world. The Greeks took their sports extremely seriously. Historically, in fact, that's extremely atypical. It's a very unusual phenomenon to play sports with great regularity and to invest a lot of resources in them. But the Greeks were doing that from a very early date. So the Olympics were the highest level athletic competition in the Greek world. Most Greek boys who came from the upper half of the socioeconomic pyramid grew up playing sports. It was a fundamental part of their education. But there's a whole other layer on top of that, which is that the Greeks spread out across the entire Mediterranean from a very early date. And so to come back to Greece for the Olympics was to do something that only Greeks did. And it was like an ethnic pilgrimage. It was to return to your homeland to do something which was very peculiarly that made you Greek, a very peculiarly Greek cultural trait. So the ancient Olympics had two basic parts. One, what the Greeks called gymnic sports, gymnastike, which was sports performed in the nude. And that was not a huge range of them. Track and field events, the pentathlon, a series of running events, and boxing and wrestling, and something like mixed martial arts, which they call the pankration. And then there were a series of horse racing events by either just horses or chariot teams for different age horses. The last one was held around 400 or 450 BCE. So they lasted about 1,200 years, give or take. The big issue is simply that the Greeks didn't have the economic resources to invest in this particular sort of activity anymore. And it just became culturally unfashionable. One way to think about it is not why it stopped, but why it lasted as long as it did. That, for an event to go on every 4 years for 1,000 years is a pretty remarkable occurrence in its own right.